Yep, now it says live.
Cool. Yes, it is.
All right. And those of you guys that are here, what I'll do is maybe one of you guys can test it out for me, and then we'll go from there.
Do you have to send out a link?
I already did, so.
It's not different?
No.
Okay.
No, it's just on this page. Most of you guys that are here, what I'll do is test it out for me then.
Send it on.
Okay.
Well, lag a few seconds, but.
Okay, that's all right.
Leg we can deal with.
Morning, guys. Hey, good. How are you? Good. It still says 0 viewers, but.
I want to use the chat window in case someone tries to communicate.
Yeah. So what's there?
It looks like the link is just to the whole thing to watch it. I think to actually join, you have to invite people. So if they like message you their email, they should be able to join.
Is it playing for you on there?
Yeah.
Hey, John. Thank you. Yeah, John Wilson from Bozeman just said it's working. So, okay, cool. All right. Well, if you guys that are watching can keep in touch and let us know how things are going on there, that'd be great. So, first, I want to just introduce myself. I'm Doug Odegaard from Missoula, and I'm going to take this camera and point it the other direction. I'm off on there. We're here in Missoula, and there's a number of different people here as well. We're just, you guys all can wave at the audience of wherever they are. So what we're going to do here is here we go, show this out to people. The purpose of what I wanted to do with this this time together was really to start the discussion about remote work here in Montana. I had an opportunity at Big Sky DevCon to present a presentation about remote work, people who do remote work here in the state. And it was great. The attendance to the class, I was actually surprised because I was up against some really great developers who were presenting, and I wanted to go to those classes too. But there were a lot of people that showed up. And so what I wanted to do is get the opportunity to get people that are doing remote work like myself together, not only to talk about it, but then there's also people who are curious about it. So actually here in this room, how many of you are actually remote workers? So a few of you are, okay. I wish I could ask way out there too. And how many of you are working for an employer or something like that? So a number of you, okay, awesome. Are you guys working, those of you that are working for employers, are you currently working as remote people, or you're in the shop? Okay, okay. So that's good to know. And you know, I think what I'm hoping is that from this discussion, what I want to do is kind of present, have an opportunity to present the Prezi that I did at DevCon, but do it in kind of an abbreviated fashion, just to help people understand a little bit about remote work here in the state. And then also be able to have some conversation, I guess, that comes up. And what I might do, I'm going to tell those of you that are out there watching this, what I might do is I may fire up a conference call, and just if anybody wants to join in to a conversation here in about, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes, then we can do that, to actually have kind of a question and answer. So for instance, John Wilson from Bozeman said, I asked him if he wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about his remote experience and stuff like that, because I will tell you just briefly for a minute, my experience was I actually started my business here in 2002. I'm originally from Montana, from Billings, came to Missoula here, went to school, left, traveled and worked, but was fortunate enough to come back to Montana. But I couldn't find a job to save my life. It was one of those where back in 2002, I could not find anything here in Missoula, and so I literally had to invent my own thing. And started working just purely as a freelancer, but I had along the way I'd hired an employee or two to do things, but it was one of those where I kind of had to create my own thing. And so now 13 years later, 12, 13 years later, I'm doing the same thing, but it's a little different now. I'm having the opportunity to not only have my own clients, but then I'm also working I'm working for a company called Aero Solutions Group, who is kind of I don't know, what would you say, Kathy? A go-between, exactly. Yeah, someone who I actually and I work with them, and then they actually engage directly with the team that I'm part of, and it's actually wonderful. And I'll talk more about that here a little bit later. But it's a case where there are a lot of opportunities, and I guess I'm going to ask real quick for you, those of you guys that are here, why do you live here? Montana.
I just moved up here.
Did you? Okay. Okay. Was it because of the job or just because of Montana?
No, I kept the job. I was already working.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. Great. Okay. And that's, I feel fortunate to be able to stay here. And I mourn the fact when there are friends of mine who end up moving away. And I'm thankful that that's becoming less and less now. We've got larger companies in Bozeman, and then like Web Filings comes over here to Missoula and starts, hiring people in. And there's more and more opportunities that are coming. But I think that our state is kind of driven in an economic development where they want to bring in big companies to hire people. Well, I kind of think the opposite direction. I think, why not bring the people, and then they can work for companies anywhere, or they can work for companies here in Montana, but they may not necessarily live in the same city. And that's a different mindset. That's a different mindset than our civic leaders or some of our corporate leaders are thinking. Because there's some companies that are like, you talk about remote work and they freak out and they're like, what? That's out of our control. We want to make sure that we can take your pulse every hour and make sure you're still working and doing those things. But some of it is kind of teaching those companies about how can people actually be even more productive, but it just looks a little different. And so that's kind of where that's at. So
I think one aspect of that is they're not thinking of bringing people in, they're thinking of getting jobs for people that are already here who don't have jobs.
Right, yeah, that's true.
I mean, that's the mentality of a politician, because they're trying to get elected again. You don't get elected by saying, I'm going to bring in a bunch of people from out of state who are going to do jobs, and you're not going to get those jobs.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, there's two sides.
Yeah, there's definitely different sides to it. So, all right, those of you out there remotely, bear with me here, because I am a novice driver at this. Now, through remote work, there are a lot of different tools that you can actually use. And I actually personally utilize certain tools like I can use GoToMeeting, I can use other things like that for it. I use HipChat, which is another one. HipChat, Skype, Link. it's funny because I actually oftentimes I'm just getting to my presentation here, so I can just put that up for you real quick. Had to kill some things before we got together, so all right, awesome. Now I put this Prezi link out here. You guys are welcome to use this, utilize it, and so forth out there, and be able to do that. This link right here is actually available out in the Google Hangout. So I'm going to hopefully be able to do this so that you guys can see it at the same time. Okay. Thank you, Ken. Appreciate the feedback. And I'm just going to ask real quick if you guys can see the Prezi or not out there. Just let me know. So, okay. So the purpose here is I kind of wanted to talk specifically about remote work and contracting and different things like that. Looking at this from different angles, I guess. Because as I kind of started with this presentation, I myself am someone who kind of created my own realm, and I've created the world of doing contracting for other people. So I will actually I will augment somebody else's IT team. But I also work with employers who are interested in building out the remote side of their team. So what I'll do is I'll come in and actually help them to see a different way of hiring people. So a different way of engaging with their team, or starting to explore how can we actually, how can we make it so that our team is spending 2 days out per week? Just kind of edging into it, because some teams may need to have presence, but then there's other teams that are very remote. For instance, there's a company called Append2. And there's actually a gentleman here in Montana, I didn't know this until this week, that works for that company, but they're 100% remote. Or, for instance, Automatic, who makes WordPress. They've got a small office, but all their people are around the world. So there's a lot of ways that we can actually help companies to actually look at different angles. Okay? So in the beginning of this, I kind of was asking, why do you live in Montana? Because of the sports? Is it because of what other things?
Okay.
Your family's here? Okay, awesome.
Everything's close.
Everything's close?
I'm down in Seattle, so.
Okay.
It takes
A long time. Yeah, yeah. How many of you are transplants from other states? Okay, all right, sounds good. Where in this state right now are the jobs? Let me ask you that question.
The oil fields?
What was that?
The oil fields?
The oil fields? All of us haven't gone to the Bakken yet, so I know they're Bozeman, Billings, and Missoula. Okay, maybe.
Flathead, Calispos, kind of hot.
Right. Okay. Okay.
I'd say IT-wise, you're looking at Helena
Okay.
or Bozeman.
Yeah, definitely government.
Or Bozeman.
Many governments in Helena is driving a lot of IT.
Yeah.
You've got what used to be right now, technology is now Oracle.
Okay.
It's driving a lot out of Bozeman.
Agreed. And in Helena, I'd wonder, it's funny, I'll stay at a hotel up there and I'll see a lot of consultants staying in the hotels. So I know that there's people that come in as well and do work up there too. But the jobs kind of are in the larger areas. However, again, this is where remote work happens. Probably, what's one of the biggest things that might be in the way of doing remote work here in the state?
Bandwidth.
Bandwidth. Okay, that's definitely one. It's funny, I drive to Discovery Ski Area to go skiing with my kids every 2 weeks during the winter. And I drive down there and I'm like, I so would love to live down here. It's just awesome, but I just keep thinking, okay, other than satellite, what are my options? And so, you know, there's things like that. So.
I was disappointed at the lack of co-working locations. Like,
Okay.
there are several out in Minneapolis where I was hoping to be able to find just like more of a real office, but I've been having to, you know, buy chai, break espresso over and over again.
It's true.
Buy 10, get free cards.
There's a reason why, yeah. Their quiche goes right to my middle. I just love that place. But yeah.
They've got some awesome
So
bandwidth, but it.
Right. So where you've been, there's been a number of co-working
Yeah,
spaces.
I don't really bother with them out there because I've got my own dedicated lines at home and stuff.
Right.
So, you know, I can go as a luxury to go out to a coffee shop and get away from my home office.
Right.
But it gets really old trying to be out here and working remotely and not have that. But I'm probably a little bit different because I don't live here. I'm only here for a month and a half.
Right.
So,
Exactly. Yeah. How many of you actually, those of you that do remote, how many of you go out to coffee shops to work? Okay. Occasionally. Okay. That's, what? It's true. It's a networking opportunity. It's funny. I was sitting in a coffee shop. I think I worked in two different coffee shops yesterday, and I got so many ideas for new software. Thinking about people complaining about apps and things like that. I was just like, wow, this is where to get good ideas. So, another thing I would like to ask people is, when are you the most productive? What time of day? Morning. Okay. Any late night coders burning the midnight oil?
Anytime the kids are asleep, we're at the grandma's.
There you go. I mean, you know, so there's sometimes when I'm doing a coding project and nobody's bugging me in the middle of the night. Just even there at the house, or else, you know, coming in via email and other stuff like that. So yeah, sometimes that affects it. You know, personally, one thing is I've got two kids. I've got a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old, and we homeschool our kids, and so it's been a blessing for me to actually be able to be there. So when times are tough or times are cool and there's fun things, they can come downstairs and share with me. We kind of have these written rules about when the door's shut, it's, you know, don't come in or just knock lightly. But otherwise, it's kind of nice. And for me, in my remote work situation, that's been a big plus. And I wouldn't trade that for the world right now. 3 years from now, probably different, because my kids are going to go, we're definitely sending them off to high school and stuff, and then I'll be like, okay, maybe I'll go to work for a company, I don't know. I still like the remote work thing, and my spouse hasn't kicked me out of the house yet with my office, so it's good. Okay, so one thing I like to do very briefly is just talk about what is a remote worker. I'm just going to check in here real quick to make sure. Awesome. There's some great comments coming in. Keep the comments coming in, guys. I will get some audio coming from you very soon. So what is a remote worker? I always like to kind of term what this is. This is my definition: a team worker who spends part or all time located away from a physical office. Now, if you work for a company and you decide, hey, I'm going to go work in a coffee shop down the street for part of the day just to get stuff done, you're kind of doing remote work. And it's oftentimes that can actually be a way to kind of test the waters of it. So you're working for somebody already, and they'd like to give you the opportunity to try it out, but you can come on over. Hey, yeah, no sweat. You can try that out by just going down the street to the coffee shop and working on your laptop for a while. I mean, that can be remote work. Okay, so you can be, in that particular aspect, you can still be a W-2, you can still be an employee, or you can actually be a contract worker, which is a 1099. Obviously, those are tax numbers, that's tax stuff, and so forth. So, traveling to an office periodically. You know, for instance, Ken, I know you're out in the audience, bud. Once in a while he works for a company here in Missoula, but he lives up in the Mission Valley, and so takes an opportunity. I think every other week or something like that, he works from home, and to me that's a benefit of his of his job, and I'm sure maybe you'd like to do a little more of that. So you can create your own schedule, but that also depends on the team that you're working with. So for instance, how many of you you participate in like daily stand-ups on your projects? I mean, what was that? As far as like a daily phone call, or you check in with your team or something like that.
I do support, so
You're kind of on the phone all the time, yeah. So, or like an all-hands-on-deck meeting for 15 minutes.
We used to do them 2 or 3 times a week when I first started on my project,
Mhm.
and then we fired our project managers and went to 1 day a week, and now we're much, much more productive.
Okay.
But we
Sure.
also have stuff like when we were going to deploy, we had about 3 days where it was 12 to 14-hour days in a Google Hangout with all of our developers and our team lead just constantly like, oh, well, I'm picking up this, like, hey, I ran into this problem, and it was just like we were in the same room.
Right.
But
yeah, and I'm going to speak from a software engineer standpoint. I'm oftentimes in a Skype call, or I'm in a HIP chat session with one of my other fellow devs like throughout the day, doing pair programming or whatever it is. But on this one project that I'm on, we have a Scrum Master, and the Scrum Master, and this would be really kind of going after the Agile methodology, and don't get me started on that because we'll be here for 3 days. But in this particular case, we have a Scrum Master who brings us together for 15 minutes in the morning and says, what did you do yesterday? What are you doing today? What's standing in your way? And it's a nice phone call to just bring the team together at 8:30 in the morning. So that particular thing, that dictates my schedule a little bit, because that's a morning call, we do that. But then after that, then I can kind of figure out what's going to be best to work with that. That's just an example. So, creating your own schedule oftentimes is a nice benefit with being a remote worker. I also want to say very briefly that during my tenure as a remote worker, I've also had the opportunity to participate in startups. I'm kind of a serial entrepreneur myself. I need to get over this and go to therapy for it or something, but I just, I keep doing it. It has nice options to be able to kind of flex the ability to do your regular work, but then also participate in a startup or startup yourself and be able to do that. Similar a little bit to, say, Google does their, I don't know what the name of it, but like every other Friday or something like that, you devote 20% time or something like that to a special project, yeah, something like that. So again, there are ways to actually be able to do some things like that. Now these are examples of companies doing remote work. I just got this list from the internet. This is not all inclusive, but 37 Signals, which is, they're the people that created Basecamp, Campfire, those tools. Jason Fried and David, who actually, I don't know whether to say he created Ruby or was kind of the founder of Ruby on Rails and stuff like that.
Rails, maybe, the guy that
Rails.
Ruby is Japanese.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks. Yeah, I never know exactly how to say it, but anyway, DHH is how I know him from Twitter. But 37 Signals they're pretty vocal about remote work. Jason Fried feels very strongly about it. He's written a book called Rework. I'll show those at the end. Automatic is the company. They have 205 employees. I don't know where I got that count. It's probably bigger now, but I'll show you a book by a gentleman who came from Microsoft actually to work at Automatic, and his tale of the first year of working there. It's a very interesting read. GitHub, others like that. So there's a number of them on here that are examples of companies doing remote work, the list is growing. I'm thankful about that. So I know that it was hard. I was a really strong supporter of Yahoo and Marissa Mayer, and then when she came out about telecommuting, I'm like, oh, okay, hang on, wait, there's good stuff about this. But I understand there's things. I'm not going to go over this too much. I've already shared a little bit about my story. Started my company about 12 years ago. During that time, I did not stop my company. I did an internet startup called Who Can Help. That was a 4-year journey of taking and creating an online marketplace. And we actually did it remotely. We had an office, but the dev team was remote. And so that was a good experience. Learned a great deal. There's something about that type of experience I encourage you to go after those startup ideas, and you can definitely learn from them. Byte Tunnel is my next endeavor, and just kind of going after that. My office oftentimes is many different places. I have my iPhone. I can use it as a hotspot with my Mac, and then I'm able to just go and work places. Now, there's times when I'm at the house. I can work really well there at the house. It's a daylight basement. But sometimes I'm a social creature. I want to get out and I want to see people, or at least engage with that.
Quick question on that. How much bandwidth do you end up eating up on your phone? Like, what are the data charges?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, I keep, on our family plan, I keep a 10 gig plan per month. But I honestly, wherever I go, if I go to the coffee shop, I'm not gonna eat this up. I'll go on the coffee shop's VPN. But if I end up at Starbucks and I need to use the VPN into one of my clients, they kill the VPN every 4.5 minutes. So that's when I have to take my phone and I have to connect it up. So there are times when I think being a remote worker and successfully not having a lot of downtime also means that you need to school yourself in redundancy. You need to be able to be ready for what if the coffee shop doesn't have internet, or what if it really is bad. You know, there's been times I've been down at the break where days are good, days are not good. Kind of matters on who's, you know, somebody's sucking down the bandwidth or something like that.
I've been down there almost every single day for the last month,
Uh-huh.
and for about 8 to 10 hours some of those days, almost never any congestion.
Yeah, and they actually they've done a lot better job. Yeah, it's been really good. So there are times when I'm at certain places and it's not great. So you just have to be nimble. You have to kind of do different things.
Multiple access points there too.
Yeah, exactly.
One back, one in front.
Yeah.
Makes a big difference.
Makes a big difference.
I got that at Liquid Planet, but when I went in there, it was pretty much the same as Sidewalk.
Yeah, it's different. So, like, you know, I go to the library sometimes. My kids will come with. They can go deal with books, and I can hang out for a couple hours and work. I've done work in campgrounds here in the area. Again, I'll just fire this up. I can actually work remotely out of my little pop-up camper. At Discovery, there's been days when I'm like, my kids want to go skiing, but I got to work. I got projects. I got to do stuff. So I'll hang out in the lodge. They have Wi-Fi there, and it works great. I can still do it. I've even done work from Africa before when I was on an engagement over there, and who knows, more to come. There's different places that you can work. How to survive from working from home, and I like to discuss this a little bit. Environment, incredibly important to have a space. Don't just have your kitchen table in the middle of the house or something like that. It's really good to have a room that's dedicated to it and that you can close a door. I mean, that might seem really stupid to say that, but it's kind of like one of those things that's just really good. You need to plan for distractions. I think that it's one of those where in the beginning, I remember my first 3 months of doing work from home was right after my daughter was born, and her nursery was right above my office. It didn't go well. And I ended up getting an office. I rented an office for a while. So that was something I learned. I just learned. I was naive at that point. So you have to plan for distractions. Nathan and others brought up the broadband. Broadband is a very important thing. So that's where personally what happens is Charter or used to be Bresnan or whatever, I would have that, but that equipment can go down. it's just normal. It can happen. So what I do is immediately flip over to this. And if for some reason I'm like, it's going to be an extended outage or something, then I'll go to the coffee shop, and I know that the break is on Centric Internet, which is a different provider. You kind of learn a little bit about who's provider and who's providing with what. Starbucks is on AT&T and other stuff like that. So it's
almost double what I would pay as a consumer to have a business plan
right.
from Comcast out there.
Right.
But I've had them show up half an hour after I called to fix time.
Yeah, you get what you pay for, and it's kind of one of those where for me it's a business expense. So that's what I do is I set it up. It's good to have secondary work locations, as I said. I have had floods in my house. I cannot, yeah. I just this spring I had a flood where I had to be out for 2 weeks. They had to dry out the basement. Fans were on. I couldn't work there. So, you know, accidents happen. Things happen. You have to have secondary work locations. You have to be flexible. Got to have a disaster plan. Another thing is water cooler ideas. Now, some people are wired. I love that picture out there that's introverts unite from their own homes. I don't know if you guys have seen that picture, but it's like this fist up here. It's awesome. I'll put it out there on the Hangout thing. But I'm an introvert. There are times when I just want to be in my cave and I want to be creative and I want to just code. But there's times also when I gotta interact with humanity. So I'm actually I'm probably tweet way too much, but that's where I've gotten to know people. And that's also been my community for tech support, honestly. I have a number of people out there that I've gotten to know in terms of being able to do that. Now, Twitter's changed a little bit. There's a lot of noise out there now. There's not as many people. So, you know, it's funny. IRC used to be, you know, that was like old school. It's back now. Is that what you use? Yeah.
Concrete 5, we've got an IRC room.
Right.
Some of the better developers in the world, and you know, we go like, hey, I can't figure this out, and then like 3 or 4 people will be like, hey man, I was bored with what I was doing. That sounds like an interesting problem.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a case where you know, those work well. I'm in Skype and Link with one of my clients, and I just know my team. And some days we're kind of smartasses about things, and we'll just take a few minutes and just water cooler about a particular subject, but you have respect with your teammates that you know you need to go back to work and they do too. And it's just kind of fun, and some teammates I've never met in my life. I mean, we don't do video calls. The scrums that we do are all audio, so I don't know what they look like. But we have fun doing, you know, talking about a few things, but knowing when to say when. So I think it's really important for remote workers to maintain some balance with that. And that's where also I kind of, like, through this experience, I hope to meet more of you to know who's in the Missoula area and maybe see you at the coffee shop or something like that. Be able to say, hey, dude, how you doing? You know, and be able to connect. So that's where I love meetups like this, to be able to do that, to stay connected. So.
And your teams, did you use instant messaging at all?
Yes, absolutely.
Like
and correct. You know, most of them, I've got way too many IM clients on my machine. I don't know if you guys suffer from that, but I've got different clients. I have some that are on. I have one that's sharing between Skype and Link, and then another couple customers that we just use HipChat from Atlassian. And then I've got other customers that are using Google Hangouts and that. So it's a little challenge, especially when I go out on my phone and I've got like 4 different clients going on here too. It just kind of matters on who you're interacting with. But I personally love IM because to me, what that allows is asynchronous communication. I kind of get this. It's been nice with the people I work with because they'll send me a message, and they know that if I've got my head in code, I don't want to context switch or do what I call a context switch over to talk to them. It might be a couple minutes, but I'll get back to them. And the same thing is that I will send a message to somebody, And I see presence-wise that they're there, but they just haven't responded yet. And it's kind of nice because we've been able to gain that together to know, if it's an ASAP, we'll look at it and respond right away. But if it's I just found this really funny picture of a kitten on the internet, we can talk later about that or something. Not that I look for cat pictures, but it's just, yeah, I'm just teasing. But just, I think the thing is that IM clients and IRC channels and things like that, I just find them to be, it's like a great medium. I will go to a Skype call or a Join Me or Hip Chat when I need to do like a screen share, or I will be in a brain pretzel with something over code, and I'll be like, dude, I need some help. I need to pair program on this. Then we'll go to a screen share, and within 5 minutes, it's like somebody will point out, hey, you missed this, or likewise. And it creates camaraderie with your team. And I think that's what employers oftentimes, it might be challenging for them to see, how can my team still be cohesive without being in the same room or the same building? There are ways. Now, 5 years ago, was it as easy? No, I don't think so. I think, quite honestly, the tools that are out there to connect us and offer that ability to have the water cooler or have the whiteboard experience while you're disconnected, that's helped tremendously. If we didn't have some of these tools, it would be still challenging, I think. So.
Mention a couple of points on the IM thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've seen that I know for Linux there's like Pigeon. I think it's Pigeon. It's like you can do multiple. You can have Skype and Google Chat and Yahoo Chat and everything just all in one application.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people like. And the other thing on it, where you're talking about it popping up, chats won't get lost like emails do.
Right.
Emails get buried in all of the other stuff, and a chat is right there, so people know that they need to respond to it.
Exactly.
But the flip side of that, like the company I work for, the higher-ups decided that instant messaging was not a proper communication medium because it didn't offer a proper paper trail. So we've been using Google Chat as our internal team thing.
Yeah.
But now they don't allow any of our chats to be recorded.
Interesting.
Which, it's weird, but it's like they've got this idea that it has to be an email that goes to everybody, and it has to have this. So depending on your corporate environment, it could be a bad thing to. I've had chats with somebody, and then like 3 days later realized that, oh, hey, I had the information, but I didn't write it down.
Right. Yeah. I know.
So
I know it's interesting because Skype is pretty good about history, but Link can be really flaky. At least the implementation I have, it gets really challenging. And also, different industries have different auditing requirements. I'm sure Sarbanes-Oxley and other things, even from a HIPAA standpoint. Those of you that work in healthcare IT, I have customers in that vein. We have to. Right. Where's the email? Yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of those where obviously the IT people of the organization have to set those standards, but oftentimes here in the state of Montana, you might be, some of my clients are like 5-person offices. They're really small or things like that. So it really matters on the entity that you're working with that may impose what the rules are on those communications. But just know there's a plethora of tools out there. Many of them have auditing and many of them don't. So it's good.
Optionet on Google Plus.
Yeah.
So that they use Slack for their water cooler and ad hoc work and stuff. Yeah,
thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, Slack, I've not looked at that, and thank you, Bob, for noting that, because that's, I think that's the thing is, I've actually thought about just firing up a website here, in even just in Montana for remote workers to be able to share these things, because, like, for instance, one of my clients the other day said, hey, have you tried Screen Echo? And I was like, Screen Echo? No, I haven't heard of that one yet. and it's where you can share screens in a pairing environment, but then you can share the cursor as well at the same time. It's kind of unique. It's not a matter of taking over control of the other person's machine. It's actually you're pair programming at the same time, and it's seamless, fairly seamless. So again, these new tools show up, or if you're an entrepreneur-like person and you want to develop something for remote work, awesome. You know, that's where some of these ideas came from. So I want to talk a little bit about how to become specifically a contract remote worker. Okay, so let's say that you you've been working for a company for a while, but you're just not really sure. You'd kind of like to do this, or in my case, how did I get into this? I was working for a company that was out of Billings, but I was living here in Missoula, and one day the FBI walked through the door and started questioning us about our boss. There was apparently a little bit of money laundering going on, and I kind of realized at that point I should probably find a new job. And
it was unrelated to the business, though. It was something else, some other business that they had, right?
No, well, I'm not sure, really.
Oh, I want to get a beer about that.
It was, yeah, the person actually ended up in the paper. There was some pharmaceutical stuff, and well, it was bad. So anyway, my son was just about to be born. I remember telling my wife, "Honey, I'm going to quit my job," and this was right before 9/11. And so it was, in that particular case, it was a situation that had come about quickly. But it may be something that you're kind of looking at, and you're like, you know what? I'd like to be able to be a little bit more of my own boss, or I'd like to go out there and see what's out there. Okay, so here's some things that I wrote down. Definitely, obviously, if you have a spouse, life partner, whatever, talk to them. Don't just decide that you're going to go into contract work and then go, oh crap, I can't really find anything. If you do decide that you would like to go that direction, especially for software development and other things like that, please come talk to me. I would be very happy to coach you a little bit on some of these things, just to give you some ideas on where to find work, because that's obviously a big thing. Ask yourself, this is a very, very important question. Can I truly care about what others are developing? Now, if you're working for a company, obviously they're paying you as an employee to care about what's being developed there. But when you're a contract worker, you're not an employee, so you're there for a short sliver of time. Can you really care about what they're doing and be all that you can be to them? I know this isn't the Army commercial here, but it's one of those where can you care about it? And the reason I say that is, especially recently in the last year, I've had situations where I've been working on a project and we brought in other contract workers and they just haven't worked out. It just hasn't worked out, and it's because I think oftentimes they come into it, they don't really know what it's about or something, and it just didn't work. And the interesting part was of having someone say, I just noticed that they really didn't care about what they were doing, or they didn't care about us. So I think it's an important thing for a contract person, because the legacy that you leave as a contractor is going to be the legacy that I have to live with, and you have to live with, and you have to live with down the road when you want to become a contractor. Because oftentimes with a company, one contractor burns them. It's kind of like when you have a bad meal at a restaurant. It's like that one bad dish, and then suddenly nobody, your whole family they won't even consider going back to that restaurant again, or the employer won't even consider having a contractor again because this one person really hosed it up. So I think it's
developers all the way down the line. I've gotten stuff where it's like, this guy broke this guy broke this, this guy broke this, yeah. And you've got 2 years worth of bad code that's coming from people that were not good contractors.
With no commenting.
Yeah,
and
figure out, and so brought in the E framework because that's what they knew, and somebody else is using Smarty templates, and it just you've got all this mismatch because they don't care about making sure it meshes with the other code. They don't care about the end of it. It's a big problem when you have a lot of remote workers.
Yeah, and there are times. Let me tell you, I've come into stinky projects. I mean, it's one of those where I'll bid it out or I'll get into it, and I will go, "Whoa, dude, this is so not what I signed up for." But I think the big thing is at that point, make sure that you are able to kind of see it through to a particular point where it's kind of safe to exit or something like that. Because the legacy you leave, it's kind of weird, but the legacy that each of us leaves within companies as contractors kind of sets the future for much of the contract work in the future. And I know, I don't mean to preach a sermon on it, but it's something that I've really seen that's really affected contracting, even here in the state of Montana. There are some shops that have had bad experiences. They got enough damage control from that they won't even consider a contractor. So, but there's others that are like, yeah, we've had a few bad eggs, or we've had, we outsourced it overseas and it didn't work well, but we're still willing to try it and things like that. So. All right, with becoming a contract worker too, it's incredibly important that you budget in your tools. Don't expect that when you start your work that you're going to have like the old laptop and you're not going to have any software and stuff like that, because especially as a contractor, the company you're working for is most likely not going to provide the tools that you need to work with. So it's kind of like being a contractor on a house. The homeowner is not going to provide the drill, the saw, all the ladders, all that stuff. You come with your tools, so budget for that. And also, emergency funds. Once in a while, there are clients out there that'll just pull the plug, and you have to have some money saved up. So it's good to have about 3 months, if you can, 3 months salary behind you, or something like that, 3 months of living expenses, just so that you can survive those dips.
Or a partner with a full-time job.
What was that?
Or a partner with a full-time job.
Or a partner with a full-time job, exactly, yeah. So,
The other thing I found when I was doing that, I thought I had enough budgeted, but then I added another probably 25 or 30% just as a buffer. Like, don't cut it to the wire at all.
Yeah,
you need to overestimate that. It's like estimating your hours. You don't say, oh, it's going to take me 4. You say it's going to take me 8.
Yeah.
So if you don't, then you're just kind of setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah, and even people who just work for companies, I mean, it's good to have that set aside. So, what was that?
Talking about money,
yeah.
One thing I would encourage, if you are an independent contractor, do not forget and do not underestimate what you're going to pay in taxes.
Correct.
It will bite you.
Very well. Thank you. Yeah, and actually, I'll flip up here to creating a legal entity, registering with the state. How is that? How are you set up? Are you going to be just a sole proprietor, or are you going to set yourself up as tax-wise with the IRS, with your tax ID, as an LLC or an S corp? Now, I'm not an accountant. I'm not a lawyer. If there's one thing on here, I think, right below that, hire a good accountant and a lawyer. I cannot say that enough. It is worth the money to get someone to advise you appropriately, because those decisions will impact just what Brian's talking about, with how much money has to come out every month or every 3 months, or in the case of sole proprietor, I don't know if you can wait till the end of the year or something like that. You still have to do quarterly, but it's one of those where if you're not a good budgeter or you're not planning appropriately, I will tell you, and I'm being honest here, I've had to deal with IRS situations. And I had actually a bookkeeper who was not sending in the payments on the withholdings, and I found out 2 years later. And let me tell you, when that IRS agent shows up at your door and you don't know it, you need to be prepared for these things. You need to be vigilant about those items. So when you become a remote worker, I just think that having a good accountant and a good lawyer who has they're not charging a ton of money per se, but you're going to spend enough money with them to have good advisement and good oversight. For instance, my accountant now, I love them. They're fantastic because every quarter they go over my stuff and make sure I'm not hosing it up. Because I just use QuickBooks and I invoice my own stuff and I do my own payroll, but I'm a software engineer. I went to the business school here and it was my second quarter of accounting. I'm like, I'm not getting a business degree because I just hate that stuff. So if you're going to do this, outsource it, do it well.
One thing that helped me decide that it was really worth paying an accountant was I realized if I'm good enough in my field that I expect people to pay me and to pay my rate,
Sure.
why would I second guess an accountant in his field and not pay his rate?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
It's the exact same thing. Once I looked at it that way, I'm like, well, yeah, duh.
Yeah.
I mean, they're obviously good at this and I'm not. So.
Yeah. There's some days though when I'm like, okay, I'm paying my lawyer $200 an hour.
Yeah.
Why am I not making $200 an hour?
Yeah, well,
I should have made that career decision. It's just like, oh, geez.
Well,
So.
I mean, you can get close to that. But one thing that I did when I started going freelance was, went part-time at my day job, but I also had, I did extra withholdings. I was taking an extra, I think, $90 every paycheck. Not a lot of money, but, I've got $90 extra in on the taxes from my day job, so if I messed it up and didn't pay that from the freelance, it wasn't a big deal. So that helped out a lot if you have a day job.
Exactly. I'm gonna real quick. I'm just gonna change this to the internal microphone. I'm gonna change the microphone just to see if you can hear the other people out there. They were saying. Okay. So they were saying they were having a hard time hearing it. So, insurance. Insurance is incredibly important in this. One thinks that, okay, I'm just going to take and hang up my shingle, go out there and start doing work. It's incredibly important that you get some insurance behind you. Now, number one, the hiring agent or the business oftentimes will ask you for that certificate of insurance. Now, when we talk about insurance, we're talking about general liability. So that means just general, it's not as though when somebody trips over your sidewalk in front of your house, often, that's going to be covered under your homeowners. But as a business, on your tax ID, you're going to want to have some general liability there. But probably in the tech field, the thing that you're going to want to ask questions about with an insurance agent is about what's called errors and omissions insurance. And you'll have certain clients maybe that will ask specifically, do you have E&O insurance? And that's errors and omissions. And that specifically means that if you hose up a project, they're going to be able to come after you for damages. Yeah. So I have $1 million coverage of errors and omissions with a $10,000 deductible. So if for some reason I have a company that I do workman's comp insurance with, and if I hose up their calculations and they lose $100,000, okay, they could come after me for that. However, what I have done in my contracts is I have written in there that the amount of money that I have collected from them is the limit that they can come after from me. So there's also an art, and this comes down to the lawyer, there's an art to writing your consulting contracts as well. Okay, so, but the errors and omissions insurance is definitely something that's there. Then another thing is decide if you want to ease into it or if you just want to make the leap. I actually have a number of people, I'm actually working with a guy right now, talking with them who's working full-time but just wants to kind of ease into it. So there's no reason why you can't moonlight unless your company specifically forbids it, which part of me is like, okay, seriously guys, come on. But that's where sometimes the moonlighting actually will bring in a little extra cash and give you an opportunity to see, gosh, is this something I could really do? So that's an opportunity to do that.
The last company Jen worked for, she couldn't do any of the same work that she was doing for up to 6 months after she lost her job.
Really?
Yeah,
That's,
because she signed a non-compete.
Non-compete, yeah.
that's pretty common.
Yeah, and it's one of those where, hey, come on in. It's one of those where
It closes on its own.
it'll close on its own. Yeah. I want to see you fight with it though. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. What were we talking about? Non-competes, yeah. If anytime you're coming into stuff and you need to question what you're signing to, whether it's an employment situation or just with a gig. I've had situations where they've been wanting to clamp down on me on communications and other stuff like that, and it kind of matters on the gig, but sometimes I'm kind of like, well, do we really need to sign that? And that would be another time when it is worth $100 or $200 if it's a full hour to send it to your lawyer and say, hey, can you help it back?
I had one where they gave me an NDA that not only did they forget to take the price and the name of the guy in India that they paid $12 an hour to, they were telling me
Off the document.
they had stuff in there like any ideas that I come up with that are or could be related to their, not code that I write, not anything, just ideas that I have are their property. And I look at it and I'm just like, I don't even need to give this to a lawyer. No, I'm not doing that. And they're like, oh, well, wait, you wanted us to do this with your company, right? We'll just do it with your company. We don't need an NDA. Okay, then.
Yeah, NDAs, that's a whole other subject. I'll stay off of it right now. How do you find work? Oh, go ahead.
Actually, I'm really curious about the NDAs.
Okay, sorry. Yeah.
I mean, how do you handle that? Because, I mean, if you're contracting, you're dealing with a number of companies that will be competing.
Mm-hmm. I think that the important part of it is taking a look at how much is it going to saddle you in the future. I've had gigs where I'm coming on to actually help a startup with stuff, and I'm going to do things like that. Okay. I mean, I'm not planning on competing with them, and my livelihood will not be tied to, the year afterwards. I can't, write certain things, or excuse me, I'm not going to be, my ability to do work in a year is not going to be based off of that. Now, I've had situations where the NDA is written so that literally I can't breathe oxygen for the next year. And that is when I come back and say, I have to come back and just say, guys, this is not viable for me. And so sometimes and do you make them mad by doing that? No, not necessarily. It kind of matters. I've had one client walk away and just say, sorry, I can't change that NDA.
And there's a big difference between non-disclosure and then
non-compete, right?
Two different
They
things.
do
Yeah.
get upset.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those where I come back and just say, if it's going to affect my livelihood, then honestly, the contract isn't worth it. Now, is it a case where I sign a contract and I can't come back and come back to that client in a different way and obtain business that way? That just makes sense to me. I'm okay with signing something like that because that's just good business. So there's going to be good things and strange things that you'll see. So
a lot of times too, you'll end up seeing you can write stuff that works in a niche where it could be good for you to work with multiple different companies that do similar stuff. But, reuse code, I try to never give up the rights to my code because a lot of times I already have the code that I'm bringing to fix whatever problem they have. And I'm like, well, I'm giving you guys a license to use my code. I'm not writing the code specifically for you. If you want that and you want me to give it to nobody else, then you need to pay me a lot more money because I can't use this for anything else. But if
Is this standard in contract?
it is for me, but I don't even write contracts.
So you consider you're licensing your code to the customer?
Yeah.
Well, oftentimes, I mean, the inventions, it all comes down to
Ownership,
inventions.
You retain ownership.
Yeah, I mean, I'll actually do contracts where, or excuse me, I'll do gigs where I will actually bring in prior art or prior work because I've created maybe a couple of open source things. Specifically, the agreement should make sure to exclude those or anything that I have done prior to that I'm bringing to the deal. I'm giving them a non-exclusive license to use for the future. So there's certain things like that you can do, but if they're paying you to create an algorithm for their specific business process, and you create like this work of art, it's like, yeah, it's the killer app. Well, it is for them. So, I think that's the thing is that you are a gun, you're kind of a hired gun in that particular case. But if you come in with your own guns, if you come in with your own stuff, then it's important for you to protect your own kind of intellectual property so they can't come back and say, well, sorry, you used it on our product, you can no longer use it. So that's definitely something. If you have a tool belt filled with stuff, throw it out there, make it open source, get a license, general public license or something on it, and then reference it from there. Because then it's a case where, okay, they're using it just like anybody else.
Those are good things to make like crystal clear when you sign the contract. Or
Absolutely. Now, have there been times during my tenure of being a contractor that I have been so hungry that I don't read the lines? Yes, it's happened. I mean, it's one of those where it's like, I need to feed the family. Just need work. It's only happened a few times, but it's happened. So I think it's just you still want to be vigilant about those because I've had times when the customer's like, we need to get started, and they want to just leapfrog over the contract, and I've learned to school hard knocks to say, you know what, let's spend an hour on that. Let's just get that hammered through, and then so it's worth it. It really is. How can you find work? Okay. Well, here in the state of Montana, I can honestly say over the last 12 years that personal networking is what's gotten me 90% of my business. Do you agree? Sure. Others? Okay. I don't know what it is. This state is just that way, and maybe elsewhere it is too, and I'm sure it is. But here in this state, we're small enough that people know each other. And people will ask me all the time for a name for some type of thing, and I will get them connected. It's kind of one of those where I guess I feel like, how do we all stay fed? We kind of help feed each other. And so the networking, the personal networking is huge. So meetups, great. LinkedIn is great. That's how Kathy and I met each other, was through LinkedIn, And then it was funny because, I don't know, it seems like people that I meet here, including, we both used to work for the same person way back when, the person that was having the FBI problems. We had a lot of laughs when we started talking about that, yeah. It's kind of like, what is it, the 7 degrees of knowing Kevin Bacon or whatever it is. Montana is just a weird thing. And it's a small enough community of people and technologists and business people that most often you can find work just amongst yourselves. That's how I got started. Was I had contracts at Blue Cross Blue Shield, state of Montana, a few other shops up in Helena. Now, was I having to huff it up there to go to work for the first year? Yeah, because I couldn't find anything here. But all the work was up there. So I was doing tons of training developers, doing contract development. So don't think that it's just in your neighborhood. You may have to think out of the box. I think now, even 5 years ago, it was different than it is now. Now it's easier. So there are different websites, like Elance, Odesk. Those are specifically ones that you can just go out there and get some moonlight, some work at night. You could get some small jobs that way. Personally, over my tenure, I've never done it.
I've seen
a lot
of
I don't know what the quality
really
is.
lowball estimates, a lot of I haven't worked with it much, but I've talked with a lot of people that have tried to find work on there, and it's like you will get underbid by somebody that promises the world and can't deliver because they're a hack. And you've got clients who are used to dealing with hacks and don't have any expectation of paying for quality. They don't have any expectation a lot of times of actually even paying. So it can be.
It's a jungle, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a global jungle, quite honestly. So personally, do I have experience with it? No, I don't. I mean, if the market got really bad, okay, sure, I'd go there. But those would be some places you could go. I found we work remotely and flex jobs were two sites that they actually kind of cater, and I know there's a few more websites lately that I've heard about. They specifically list like remote work jobs, like W-2 remote work. You can go on Stack Overflow, and they specifically, sometimes when I'm going to Stack Overflow and I'm researching a question, and then I look over on the side and I see remote work possible. And I always like to click on them and see what kind of jobs are out there. So even on Stack Overflow, they have, and they'll say remote possible or telecommute or something like that that's out there. Now another one, and I'm doing a shameless plug here because Kathy's from Aero Solutions Group, and she and I work together. And what it is she is involved with businesses that need tech workers. I'm a tech worker. And so it's kind of been nice because in the past, I personally have always had to keep my I call it my pipeline, my sales pipeline. So I've always worn the salesman hat. I always got to be out there looking for my own business and doing it, but then also doing the gig. So it's kind of, you wear both hats. It's been refreshing with Kathy and I just working through it because she's out there meeting with the people who need stuff, and then as opportunities arise, then we can talk about that. Or she has a need for some PHP work, and I happen to know that you're a PHP person. Again, it comes back to that networking at that point. That's how we keep each other fed. And Aero's out of Billings, so this is a Montana company, locally with people here. So, and I know there's probably other companies here as well in the state that might do that. I don't know. But personally, I've found that that's worked really well for me lately because, and I'll say this, it's nice because I don't have to do the billing and the accounting. I send an invoice to Kathy and they cut me a check, and then they work with the client for payment. So I don't have to deal with the accounts receivable part, which is nice. I don't know if you have any input on that, but it's I don't know. It's a great relationship. So again, that's just a unique situation that's out there. But finding work, obviously, you have to eat. So
Can I add a couple on there?
Yeah, go ahead.
If you work with something like a CMS or anything that does kind of plugins, writing even a cheap, simple, or even free plugin, especially one that teaches people how to do something, people will see it, they'll see your code, and a lot of times you'll get referral work through other developers and agencies who are like, this is close to what I need, but I need it customized. Can you do it? Or they're like, hey, this person's smart enough that they wrote this, so therefore I want to use them on that project. And where I've been looking for work myself is not really going for an end client, but as a developer, I've been working with designers and agencies, and if you can get one of them as a customer, they deal with the people that are going to want to undercut you and do the scope creep and all of that. They're going to be like, oh, hey, yeah, we do understand that we need to pay you on time, and yes, we understand that this is not part of the estimate. And they're going to have a lot of repeat work, and so the company that I worked for before going freelance, they did the same thing, and it depends a little bit on what you do, but if you can get kind of that subcontracting work, it becomes, you're not out there chasing jobs. You're just saying like, oh yeah, that sounds great, let's schedule that for November.
Exactly.
And it really helps with the feast and famine.
Right.
Thing.
Right. Because that's when you grow hairs and gain weight. Is those times when it's like, oh boy, things are getting slack. You know, usually you should lose weight because you're eating ramen noodles, but it's just one of those things. So I think that's, you know, maintaining that cash flow and that pipeline of stuff. Now, hopefully, is there a possibility of getting remote work that is not a 3-month gig? Yeah. I mean, honestly, that's part of where I'm blessed right now. And some of the things I'm working on is I've been working on one of them for what, 3 years? The thing is if you do good work, and you maintain that degree of separation, and the client is not dictating your schedule. I absolutely must say that 14 times. If they begin to truly dictate your entire schedule in your life, you're an employee, technically. So there are certain ways that you have to buffer yourself. But the thing is can you get long-term gigs? Absolutely. So that is possible out there.
Start out on the budget to 2015.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's always, I mean, I'm telling you, that's one of those where it's like I feel like at that point, you're suddenly kicking into high gear where you're putting out really good quality work because you're part of the family and you want to impress your clients and you want to do everything you can. Remember back in the beginning when I was talking about caring about the work that you do. I'm telling you, it pays off. It really does. And so
it had a couple bad contractors, like you talked about, and they're like, oh, hey, we can work with them.
Exactly.
They write good code. We don't want them to go.
Right.
And we don't want to even make them upset by micromanaging them. We want to just let them do what they're doing because they're doing it good and they can stay hands-on.
Absolutely. And it's incredibly important that when you're working as a remote worker, and I'll say this whether you're an employee or a contract worker, it is incredibly important that you over-communicate with people. They want to know that you're actually working. Code check-ins are great, because if you're doing frequent check-ins, they're able to see what you're producing. Or the daily stand-up, like I said, the daily meetings, huge. Don't skip them, because if for some reason the decision maker begins doubting whether or not they're getting their money's worth from you, that's where doubt starts to creep in. So it's incredibly important that you show that you care. Now there's more books, and by the way, I'm not a reader. I have Audible on my phone and I listen to books. So as I'm traveling or I go out exercising, hiking, running, or in the car, I listen to books all the time. So Remote, Office Not Required, is written by the guys at 37 Signals. It's a good book. It is a no BS account of how they've done remote work at 37 Signals. And it's they just kind of lay down, this is what you should do, and things like that. It's very much a first-hand account. Okay? So I found that it's a very short read, so if you like to actually physically touch the paper and smell it, it's a short book. It's one of those where in a couple hours you can listen to it on Audible as an audiobook. The Power of Habit, I've got to say, is probably one of my favorite business books of all time. I don't know, I've read The Lean Startup by Reese, various ones, but I have to say that The Power of Habit has impacted me in my personal life and my business life. It's an incredible book. Charles Duhigg wrote it, and it really helps a lot, especially in the remote work world, to kind of help you dial in your habits. And how do you break bad habits? What is it like to be a remote worker and then have this little addiction to social media? And you want to spend more time Facebooking and tweeting than actually working. It's incredibly important that you have to be very self-aware and capable of dealing with habits. So The Power of Habit is an amazing book. It's kind of nice. Duhigg's on Twitter, and he'll answer questions out there that you might have on the book as well. And then Scott Birkin, this is the year without pants, and I ran into this one last year, and he actually came from Microsoft, and he was a program manager there, I think, in the Internet Explorer group for years, and then left, but then there was a position at Automatic, which is the company that makes WordPress. And so he decided to jump on for a year, and this book is the first year. So it's literally a chronology of his first day there and how they brought him into the fold. So it's a really, really interesting book. It's not just about remote work, but it's about a company that does, really almost 100% remote and how they achieve it. So it's really an interesting read. So, have you guys read any other books? I like to ask as well. Are there other remote books that are out there that you might have come across? Okay. If not, if there are, pass them along. That'd be great. This is really from the viewpoint. I'm going to come back here for a second. Let's see if I can come back there. This is in terms of someone that's actually a company. And when I did my presentation in DevCon, I had people that were employers. Why would you do remote work? And these are some of the questions I like to ask them. Is or actually not necessarily questions, but these are things that might come up. Like, how would you do it? Or how would you adjust your culture? And it's one of those where if a company wants to try it out, like I said, take one of your people and every 2 weeks give them a day at home. See how it goes. Try it. I mean, what's really going to be the harm in that? Well, okay, make sure that their data is secure. Make sure they've got a laptop. Let's make sure that that experience is going to be okay from a broadband standpoint and everything like that. But why not experiment? Trust is a huge thing. But I think the thing is that that's where business leaders can take some of their people that they trust and they can try and experiment with it and see what's the productivity boost. And be able to have an open communication channel with that person to be able to find out, how's it going? How can we make this better? Is it easier to just do a couple mornings a week or something like that? So, success and failures. I mean, like I said, some companies will not do remote work with their workers because they've had a bad experience with a contractor. And they'll think, well, if the contractor can't do it, my employees can't do it. Well, maybe not. The employees have they may have a different bond, or they've been there for a while. So, the remote work there, again, a lot of it is just overcoming the fear. That's what I like to tell people. Just try it.
A book around this topic that's not specifically targeted in remote work, but I think can be applied is Tribal Leadership by Dave Logan.
Okay.
And it has five stages of culture.
Okay.
And the lowest when you talk about gangs. But the second level is like the Joker culture.
Okay.
Which is low trust, the boss is an idiot, that kind of space. And I was at Business Objects offices in Paris, and I was working remotely. And I was talking with this manager, and he said, I would never allow that kind of stuff. That's my people. And I think a lot of that has to do with that kind of low-level culture, and building your culture up to a much higher level of trust. Of course, those would be trustworthy, doing good work.
Right.
But there's a lot of instructions in that book about how to move your cultures.
Interesting. Okay.
What was the name of that? Tribal Leadership.
Tribal Leadership. Okay. I want to ask you real quick, if you don't mind me asking, how long have you been doing remote work, and how did you get into it? Was it a remote position in the beginning?
No. So I had been at a company that was part of Xerox Park.
Oh, okay.
And I had been doing really well. I got a reward for good customer service and a lot of respect from customers, and also had published an article in the magazine, and that came out in '99. So I was working on that in '98 when I approached my boss and said I wanted to work remotely. I was going to move to Montana and I would like to keep my job so now.
Okay.
And they said yes.
Interesting. Okay. Because where were you before?
In Silicon Valley.
You were in
Local area.
Okay. Okay. So down there. Yeah, and that's where I love to hear stories from other people as well, in terms of how did they get into it, or just simply talking to a boss or something like that and seeing what the possibilities are. So yeah. Then project management of the team is really big, and that's something that any business is going to have to deal with, that kind of thing. So that's where I really personally have had excellent experiences with really bringing in the agile techniques to my teams and doing Scrum. But a lot of times we're in a Kanban mode or we're in a Scrum Bon, and I apologize for the terminology if you haven't heard it before, but there's different ways to run projects, and it just kind of helps with accountability, and it helps to smooth out the edges of the team, maintaining the expectations, the accountability, and the communication. Honestly, it's just, I don't know, it's really something that helps.
It can add a layer of transparency for the client too.
Correct, exactly. Yeah, it's rather than the client, cutting you loose and then, 2 months later calling, going, okay, where is it at? Why not just keep them in the fold all the way up and do iterative development, bring out the product little by little with them, so at the end they don't go, crap, that isn't exactly what I was thinking at all. So that types of things.
One of the principles in the Agile Manifesto is customer collaboration over contracts.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of embeds some of that trust principle.
Yeah.
But I'm really curious how you do the Agile stuff. So many of the Agile people really this remote working, like really are doing.
Yeah, I know, and I had someone here come here, and they were an Agile person, and they said, I don't like remote teams at all, and it was hard because I took offense to it, because it was just like, seriously, it can work. But I also respect the fact that there are some projects and some experiences where the personalities of the people that are on the remote team just may not have worked. So I have to remember that it's not a diss against it entirely, or I try to help people to see that, remote can work, but there are certain situations or certain personalities or people where it doesn't. Good.
This afternoon I was working in my office in Missouri with my daughter in North Dakota with a client in Olympia.
Mm-hmm.
Between the phone, we go to a meeting, and sharing screens and keeping track of everybody's steps in the Google Doc and spreadsheets. Yeah.
Thankfully, we have the tools to make it seem like we're there.
Yeah, and so we didn't get on each other's nerves. My daughter's an introvert. She prefers not to have people talking around her.
Mm-hmm.
So we just shut the phone off while she's working, and then we pick it up again when she has a question, and we do that.
Exactly.
I was going to say, I'm a stranger to this drill, by the way. I actually am in the Bay Area right now. I'm actually visiting the area because my wife and I think we're on the family.
Oh, cool.
I deal with Scrum teams and Kanban all the time. Even though I work in the office, where I'm currently at 90% of the time, I have 3 people there that 100% of the time they're never in the office. We just have standard schedules, kind of like what Doug said, where our stand-ups are always between 9 and 10 o'clock on West Coast time. So no matter where you're at in the world, between 9 and 10 West Coast, you're going to have to be available for stand-ups. And then we do pass the keyboard around for the demos, etc. So it seems to work out really well. But everybody that is currently with us that is remote are employees, so they're not contractors. I actually had to take that back. We now have a contract company out of Argentina that seemed to be very well with a Scrum environment as well. So it can work It's just setting up those boundaries. So here's when our meetings are, otherwise just get your phone. And we use Skype as another main tool. Everybody that's in our IT or works for us, remotely for IT, whether it's a contractor, et cetera, we all share Skype. So anybody wants to get a hold of me, get it, Yes.
Can you?
Yeah, they just changed that, it's about 2 years ago, I think. Yeah, it's that little plus button on Skype. There's a little plus, when you bring up Skype, there's this little plus button, you hit plus, and I actually run between 3 and 4 screens, and you can pick which screen you want to share. So it's there.
I heard they're also opening up the limitation that you have to have a premium account.
You don't have to have a premium account, I can do up to 6 people I can count. So
But that was only recently shifted.
that was about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I think.
There is some good shifting with premium concept.
The main reason I don't like it is it has never played well with any Linux box that I've ever tried it on.
And that's a whole nother area of discussion with tools that work on the right platforms, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna real quick here. I'm gonna open up just the phone line real quick for them to offer just some Q&A real quick. And I don't want to hold us too long here, but I just thought I'd do that real quick, just to offer the opportunity for anyone to jump in.
That's remote.
Yeah, and I was trying to get the audio going. I guess I had to invite people into the Hangout in order to hear them and stuff like that. So
Yeah, that's what I was saying, you can do like 15 people in it, otherwise the rest of them are broadcasting.
right, and that's where a lot of this was broadcasting. So I'm just going to see if anybody joins up here. So, do you guys have questions while we're waiting? I mean, we've been kind of open here for a little bit anyway,
I
but
wanted to just add to that networking piece, the importance of it. There's all sorts of different ways to network too, and I've gotten a lot of work just by being visible in the community. Helping with startup weekends, or helping with bar camps, or just being seen as someone that's willing to put some time and energy into the community, and just make you more visible and more desirable to work with.
okay.
That's what I was trying to get at with the, make a tutorial code. So
Yeah.
I get so many clients come up, potential clients, they're like, hey, we saw that you know how to do this, and we learned from you, and therefore we want to work with you. And it's, supporting the community, because then you're also getting more people that are progressing in their career, and you're helping them out, and so they're excited.
Anybody out there? Hey. Hey, can you just briefly share with the people here in this room, and I'll try to put it near the computer as well, just to tell me a little bit about your experience with remote work and what you do out of Bozeman.
Sure thing. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. I have a decidedly different perspective on this from Doug, who seems to be doing a lot of contract work. I used to live, I was born in Bozeman, so I grew up here and went to high school. I actually met back in high school a long time ago. And I moved to Austin, Texas in the late 90s and began working for companies down there. And the company that I eventually, that I still work for now, is an Austin company. And things were going well there, but me and my wife really wanted to move back to Montana. So I started kind of trying to groom my boss with the possibility that I could work remotely and come up here and still work for that same company. Really large company, it's public, 100 employees, and it worked out that was going to be possible. So about 4 years ago, I started kind of test driving it by working from home in Austin, but not coming into the office, and working on technology, tools, things that would let me do that for the same company up here, and things have gone quite well. Some things that I kind of wanted to call out is some of the things that we ended up doing are pretty different from what I've hit with most people. A lot of people use IM. They have a kind of a daily stand-up. The first thing I did when I started working from home, one of the challenges of being a remote member of a mostly physically co-located team is it's very difficult to fit in. Everybody kind of does their cute conversations, and they have their meetings and water cooler talk, and you just oftentimes get left out if you're not a part of that. So the first thing I did was I actually set up a PC in the Austin office with a camera and a mic, and I would Skype in to that into my cube in the morning, just as if I was driving down to the office, and I would literally be Skyped in all day long throughout the whole day. And it worked surprisingly well. I had 2 Skype accounts, and I just Skyped myself, and I was unable to be forgotten or left out. They would walk right up to my cube and have a conversation with me, just as if I, was there. And that worked really well. And because I was so present in their minds, when they did go to a conference room or something like that, they would always remember. One of them would say, "Hey, John, you can Skype into my laptop or something," so I could still take part. And so that worked really well. But what happened then is, so I moved up here and kept that going for another probably 9 months. And the manager of our group of about 6 people, it wasn't a large team, decided to leave the company. And for whatever crazy reason, he thought I would be the best candidate to manage the team after he left. And so it's one thing to be a contributor on a team that has remote workers, but to manage the team, being the only remote worker, is a whole thing, another thing entirely. So what I decided to do, it was a very chatty team. It was lots of cube conversation. People were just constantly kind of bouncing ideas off of each other and trying to sort of share. It was a bunch of coders, so lots of coding questions. And you know what the SSH key is to this, and asking those kinds of things around all day long. So I kind of made the executive decision that when I became the manager, the team was basically going to become fully remote. The guys were welcome to work either in the office or at home anytime they wanted. And what we did is we did away with the Skype thing because most people logically decided it would be better to work from home. They're more comfortable there. You didn't have to commute in Austin traffic, which is hideous. And so what we did is we actually started using a gaming platform called TeamSpeak. Okay, and that was just an audio-only system, but it's always on, and it's designed to be used in the background. Now, you're supposed to log into this while you're playing a video game. Other things with your computer, if you have this thing in the background, it just lets you have audio conversations. And we did it exactly the same way. Everybody would come in at 9 or 10 in the morning into TeamSpeak, and they would be in there all day. And it worked really, really well for this particular team because it was sort of a chatty, cute conversation team. All the guys really liked it. They enjoyed working that way. We used it as a presence indicator. We had a special kind of channel that was where you went if you were away from your desk or out to lunch or something. People would move themselves into these channels, knew who was around and who wasn't. And we worked that way for about 18 months very successfully. Now, that being said, it's not for every team. This particular team, like I said, was a very chatty team that just talked a lot. We also had the benefit of having worked together physically for some period of time prior to me leaving. Everybody knew each other. We'd gone to beers many times. It was a very familiar group, so it was kind of groomed for success. But it worked because of the makeup of that team. And I think that there are many teams that don't work that way. They're not that chatty. That can be distracting. And something, the team I'm on now, which is actually a different team, doesn't work that way. It's a normal Scrum thing. We've got 3 remote members, including myself. And we just dial in once daily during the daily scrum, and that works fine for that team because it's less of a local team. I guess a couple of things that I wanted to kind of comment that I've kind of learned over the years. One of the things is, and Doug touched on a lot of these topics while he was talking, but for it to be successful, the company really needs to have made the switch from being an hours-focused company to being a results-focused company. That there are still companies out there that think that the hours that you're sitting in your desk are what matter. And you need to get to the point where it's the results that come out of your output, regardless of what hours, times of day, things like that. So you have to have, this kind of gets to the trust issue. Having some system like Scrum or something where it's very, very visible on a at least daily level, the kind of output that you're doing and the kind of results you're contributing to the project, everybody can see that, then it becomes a non-issue. If you don't have that in place and people don't know what you're doing, it gets forgotten, and you just fall off the face of the earth. The other thing I guess I wanted to say is that many times a remote worker who's an employee, remote worker versus a contractor, they kind of come in with the mindset that it's the company's job to make them successful as a remote worker. And I feel like this is completely wrong. I feel like if you want to try to go after some kind of a remote position, it's 100% your job to make it work. Insert yourself into the meetings you need to be in. Make that communication so clear and so constant that it can't be forgotten. It's really on you to make it successful.
Good.
I guess that's kind of the nutshell of my notes. Any comments or questions, I guess?
First, I have to say, awesome. Thanks, man. I appreciate you doing that. So, yeah, no, that's good. We do have one question here, Jeremy.
Oh, I just wanted to, with the results-based thinking, so one of the guys I work with remotely, he was telling me how either Apple or another like really huge company went to how many lines of code did you produce today as their metric of. There was a guy that came in and said negative 30,000. They're like, what? I refactored a bunch of stuff. It works a lot better. I got rid of a bunch of redundant code that didn't crack. You want to come?
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's not about the lines of code. It's not about the hours that you sit down. I've had 3 hours where I got done more than I did in a week sometimes, just because it's like click, 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 boom.
Yep. Yeah,
so
exactly. No, that's great. That's great. Nora, go ahead.
You know, I just broke off a business relationship with somebody that actually wanted to use the remote working as a way to hide a lack of commenting, a lack of record keeping, a lack of any kind of accountability for doing best practices. And he thought that if he could go in his own little world, Nora wouldn't look at his comments, Nora wouldn't look at his code, Nora wouldn't ask for documentation because he wanted to be independent. He can go be independent with his own clients, not mine.
John, thank you very much. That was awesome because I think you bring a unique stance as well as Harold did too in terms of being an employee, being remote. Because myself, I'm an employee, but I'm an employee of my own company. Whereas someone like yourself is from there as well. So thank you. Is there anyone else on the line real quick? I'm going to be wrapping up pretty soon here, but okay. Just briefly, I just want to ask real quick, in terms of from this point forward, I wanted to ask if anyone had any comments about future discussions about this kind of stuff, future meetups. Would you be interested in continuing this conversation? If so, what would be maybe some topics? You wouldn't necessarily have to answer today, but just, I guess, think about it. But does anyone have any feedback at the moment about that?
Well, when you talked about, you have a lot of things to say about Agile.
Yeah, I feel like that's definitely a rabbit trail that we could run on, and I love to talk about it. So.
Well, for me, I've never been to a satisfactory session about distributed agile when I've gone to conferences. And what you're bringing, what your guest on the phone was bringing, is the most interesting stuff I've heard so far.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay. Awesome.
We need to do that remotely.
We could do that. We will figure out the audio and not have a rookie driving, but yeah. Go ahead.
I would love to hear other people's commenting and documentation standards. We learned something really formal in CS grad school, but you know, so with the waterfall, we all study that. So just because we studied in grad school doesn't mean that that's what everybody uses. And why different systems work for different people, and you know, I would love, especially on smaller micro business projects, I'm starting to incorporate more of what I learned in CS and just plain documentation because it's so helpful in the long term.
Okay, awesome. What I would say is if you have more ideas or you have more feedback, or I'll ask for this in the comments. This meetup had a lot of comments in it, which was great. I probably contributed to the noise, so I apologize for filling people's email boxes. But after the meetup happens, utilize that conversation thread to post ideas. Because I guess I feel like I would like to continue this conversation. I would like to build a community of people who are enthusiastic about remote work, because I feel like it's a whole nother economic development driver here in the state that people aren't talking about. Everyone's so focused on, you know, bringing in large companies and doing brick and mortar and different things like that, and it's amazing. Guess what? I pay taxes too. I build the economy here too as a remote worker, and I think it's kind of one of those things that has legs, and there's definitely opportunities. I'm telling you, I have got so many projects that I've heard about that they need people on, and other things like that. It's just like, wow, there's a lot out there. It's just people don't know about it. Or
You're
it's
also
trying to get
bringing
connected.
money directly in. You're not bringing money in that the headquarters of the company, they've got one manufacturing plant here, but all of their profit is going to New York or the Cayman Islands. You're making whatever you make a year, and you're spending it in your local community, and you're generating those taxes right there in a much more direct way to.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of like, it's weird with the whole, you know, buy local kind of stuff. I mean, it's a unique twist. So.
Just one comment about the remote work that might lead into another session. Is someone at an Agile conference who spoke at the Mach 1 conference, William Sewell, said, we shouldn't try to scale Agile for large companies, we should scale large companies for Agile. Microsoft can shed a bunch of people.
It's like a thing you could put on the wall. Yeah.
We need more human scale teams, and remote work is a perfect place for that. And I imagine a lot of work's just going to go to the cloud. And these big companies can try to beat that cloud company here and there, but
the largest development company, like Shop in Minneapolis, doesn't have a CEO, but they don't have a president of the company. Everybody is a co-CEO. And so they've all got autonomy, they all work on their own stuff in their own time. And it's weird how they're the most successful people out there, even though they don't adhere to the traditional idea of how code is supposed to be written and how a company is supposed to be organized.
Yeah.
I guess the precedent died way back in the day when they were first starting. Anybody had a heart to take over. Yeah, they all liked it too much.
That's interesting. Well, yeah. And I have to say, this is, I mean, as the sun streams in, this is a beautiful place to live. So, you know, it's not like I want to broadcast it to the world to have a bunch of people move and be remote workers, but at the same time, I really think there's opportunity. So, anyway, thank you very much for coming. This has been great. I hope those of you that are listening in have been able to hear stuff, and if this works appropriately, this session should be recorded on my YouTube channel, so be able to go back and watch it. And then I would like to continue the conversation, I think, with the Agile stuff and other things like that. If you have topics you want to explore or whatever, put them out there, or even just go in and say, I want this meetup about this particular thing, and one of us can, you know, participate in organizing. So, okay.
Lisa.
Yeah, thank you very much.